Senator, thank you so much for spending time with us. Down there,
Delighted to be here.
down there at the Capitol, you're spending a lot of time on infrastructure, and we can touch on that. But there's another topic also that's very hot, which is cryptocurrency. We heard from Gary Gensler, the head of the SEC, just yesterday about the possibility of an ETF for cryptocurrency. Let me start with the most basic question from your point of view, because I know you've spoken out about this. What should U.S. policy be toward cryptocurrency? Are we for it or are we against it?
Look, I think that's actually not quite the right frame, David. The way I think about this is that if people are going to be out there trading in it, there needs to be a cop on the beat. Because when there's not a cop on the beat in any market, then it's the small traders who get cheated. And that's what always worries me. So right now, for example, if you trade in stocks, you know that pump and dumps are illegal. You know that a broker has to come through with what the broker promised, and you'll be insured if the broker runs away with all the money. Those are things that are not there in crypto. So this is about putting some basic rules in place so that anyone can trade with just some basic confidence that the biggest kinds of scams will have a cop on the beat to blow the whistle and put a stop to it.
And that raises the question of who is the cop on the beat, or who gets to decide who the cop on the beat is? I mean, is it the SEC? Is it the CFTC? Do we need you up in Congress to tell us?
You know, I think that's a good question. And the answer is right now, we don't have any cops on the beat to speak of. And there are going to be, I think, a lot of different approaches. So Gensler is now talking about what the SEC can do. But there are other spaces for other actors, depending on how you think crypto plays out, whether you see it as a currency, whether you see it as an investment. That means you really put it back on Congress. So ultimately, I think it's important for Congress to do its job. But in the meantime, I think it's important for each of our regulators to step up and take hold of the piece that's within their jurisdiction.
So, Senator, you understand this area so well. From your point of view, give us a sense of what the biggest advantage, the biggest upside to cryptocurrency is, and the biggest risk to cryptocurrency.
Sure. So the biggest upside to cryptocurrency could be expansion or democratization of access to the financial system. You know, right now in the United States, we have tens of millions of people who are either unbanked or underbanked, which means they have to go to check cashers and pay 3% of their paycheck just to get their cash. They have to pay money in order to make a payment on their utilities or to pay their rent payment. And that's costing those people a lot. It is possible that moving to a digital currency system, or I should say expanding to a digital currency system, could bring in more people. And there are a lot of different ways that could be designed. The downside, of course, is so long as it's an unregulated system, you may be pulling more people in so that they can get cheated. And that's not what we want.
Senator, I think I understand the possible risk for the consumer, the person who puts their good money into crypto and who knows what happens to it. What is the macroprudential risk? What's the risk to the system overall at this point? Is it broadly enough used that it actually could jeopardize the system?
So do you remember money markets back in 2006, 2007, 2008, and how much money flooded into money markets because the banks were paying like nothing in interest on money and on savings accounts, and the money markets were saying, hey, put your money over here, we'll pay a little more and give you all the benefits of a checking account. And then the crash came, and folks wanted to withdraw their money from those money markets. And we had one of two choices as a federal government, as a nation, and that was either let the money markets crash and drag down the entire financial system because they had become huge, or force the taxpayer to back up those money markets so that they didn't take down the economy. You run the same kind of risk right now with crypto. The bigger it gets and the more it stays outside the financial system, something goes wrong, there's a run on crypto, there's a problem elsewhere in the economy. I don't want the U.S. taxpayer to be the one who gets called on to back up another financial system again.
When we talk about risk to the system overall, obviously we think about the Federal Reserve and its role because it's not only a supervisor of monetary policy, but as you know better than anyone, it also is supposed to be regulating the banks. As we look to the expiration of the first term of Jay Powell, the chair, what should we be emphasizing, monetary policy or regulation?
Look, I think they're both important. And here's the thing, you can get somebody who's good on monetary policy, but they could also be good on regulation. I want somebody who does both. And I've raised concerns with now Chairman Powell since he was nominated about his attitude toward regulation.
Do you think his performance thus far warrants him being reappointed?
Well, my concern is that over and over, he has weakened a regulation here. He has led the Fed to ease up there. He's led the Fed to help protect the biggest financial institutions. And there have been dissents against that. I'm very concerned about that. We need someone who understands and uses both the monetary policy tools and the regulatory tools to keep our economy safe. Let's not forget what happened in 2008.
So, Senator, as you talk about somebody who can do both, I think at least about Lael Brainard, because she's spoken out on regulation as well. Is that someone who conceivably might be the appropriate person to do both monetary policy and regulation?
So, look, I don't want to speculate on for particular jobs, but I read Lael Brainard's dissents in many of the deregulatory actions that the Fed has taken. And I have to say, they are strong and powerful dissents. She makes a good case for why it is the job of the Federal Reserve to be that cop on the beat and to make sure that the largest financial institutions are not putting our economy at greater risk.
So, Senator, as someone who's, if I can say this, a student of the Federal Reserve, how it works, from your understanding, might it work to have somebody who's very strong on monetary policy in the #1 job, chair, and work with somebody who's a much stronger person on the regulation front as a vice chair?
Well, you know, the problem is that it's the chair of the Federal Reserve where power is concentrated. It is the chair who decides what policies go forward. It is the chair who decides when to call a vote. And that's not something that's shared between the chair and anyone else. That's why those of us who do watch the Fed, sure, we pay attention to all of the spots on the Fed, but it's the chairmanship where power truly resides.
Senator, I want to turn to a subject that's on all of our minds, I dare say, which is COVID-19, and particularly this Delta variant. As we become increasingly concerned, the CDC has expressed new guidelines. Give us your sense, as a senator, as part of our legislative body, is there anything the government can do? Because we're seeing now scientists say we're having a tough time. We have to get beyond 70% vaccinated. We need to get to 80 or 90% vaccinated. Is there something the government could do to help get that done?
Well, look, the government's already done an enormous amount. Let's give a round of applause to President Biden and all of his team for having gotten us to the 70% point and to make sure that those vaccines are freely available virtually everywhere in the country, and that we're starting to try to get those vaccines to other places around the world. Remember, with COVID, it's not going to be enough just to get it under control in the United States. We need to beat back this virus everywhere in order to protect ourselves. But it also means that we've got to double down in some areas. We know still that there are racial disparities, for example, in access to COVID. That means that we have to double and triple our efforts to reach communities where there may be vaccine hesitancy. The other part, I believe, is that we have to empower those who are trying to do things like provide a safe workspace. You know, employers who are saying, I want my employees, I want my customers to have a COVID vaccine before they come in. That's how our whole nation starts to work together to make sure that we beat back this virus. And I think those of us here in Congress should support them in doing that.
Senator, one of your fellow senators, a fellow lawyer, I might say as well, Amy Klobuchar, has proposed legislation to address the question of misinformation about health information, particularly when it comes to COVID-19, to really amend Section 230 of the Communications Act, you know it well, to really reduce some of the immunity that social media has. Do you think the government should be taking some action to really nip in the bud some of the misinformation? Because a lot of people think that's part of the cause of the hesitancy on getting vaccinated.
Well, look, I think that we really need to do something about misinformation. I also think we need to do something about Section 230. But let me focus specifically on the misinformation. You know, Vivek Murthy, the Surgeon General, spoke out about this a couple of weeks ago and talked about how right now there are algorithms that are set up that if you're a little unsure, maybe you heard something from, you know, one of your cousins and you just want to check it out, you haven't gotten a vaccine yet, by asking questions online about COVID vaccine safety, you actually are more likely to get misinformation. It's more likely to pull in the conspiracy theories, the really horrible stuff. And this is a time when that kind of misinformation not only puts the individual at risk and the individual's family at risk, it puts our whole country at risk. And so I think pushing back right now on these social media platforms and saying you have a public health responsibility here. You've got to clamp down on this misinformation. I think now's the time to do that, and we can do that quickly.
It's a great point. As I understand it, it's one of the perverse effects of those algorithms. They'll actually feed you the information, the misinformation, when you're trying to figure out the right answer. Let me finish with one question. It's not directly in your responsibility, but it's very much in the news, and I'm curious about one particular aspect of it, and that is our governor here in New York, Andrew Cuomo. As we know, it's very much in the news. We've had Democrat after Democrat come out and express their willingness for him to leave office. You expressed a strong view on this when it first came up. But this is my question about the Democratic Party. Is this at some point damaging to the Democratic Party, or is it unique to Andrew Cuomo in New York?
Look, Andrew Cuomo should resign, full stop. But the second part of that is I'm proud to be a Democrat who calls out someone, even if it's someone in my own party. And that's who we are. We have stepped up and said, when a report comes out with this kind of documented information, it's time for us to believe the women and to ask the elected official to step down. And if he refuses to do that, then I support those who call for his impeachment.